On this channel we find interesting headstones, do the research, and then tell the story. We're here at the Riverside Cemetery in Hay River, Northwest Territories, Canada. We have been able to find Private Magloire Cardinal in the cemetery, which is great. It would have been one of the first people buried here in the first row. And of course we managed to look at almost the entire cemetery to find him back here, but we're really interested to see what Private Cardinal his life was all about. Canada's origins go back to the 1500s, what is now Quebec, and records, especially with the Catholic Church, do exist. My French is weak, but good enough, and I've been able to translate information and chase down leads. The Métis and Indigenous peoples have records indicating their settlements from the Canadian government called scripts. And unfortunately it's been difficult to follow up on those and the Cree people. Magloire Cardinal's life is the story of Canada. Magloire was born on July 9, 1897 at Fort Vermilion in what is now Alberta. He was born a Métis, being a mix of Cree, one of the Indigenous peoples of Canada, and French. The first inhabitants of North America arrived 14,000 years ago in what is now Alaska, hunting large mammals at the time such as woolly mammoths, mastodons, and muskox. The Cree first lived around the James Bay area and moved westward and north as the fur trade grew in Canada. Records of the Indigenous peoples didn't exist until the last few centuries. Magloire Cardinal's 8 times great-grandfather was born in La Rochelle area of France. It is believed that Joseph was born in the later 1500s and married Lavinia Annie Marins. Joseph and Lavinia migrated to Canada in the 1630s and settled in the Montreal area of what's now Quebec. Son Simon and his family arrived later in 1659. Generations of the Cardinals stayed in the Montreal area and were involved in the fur trade with the Hudson's Bay Company. Magliore's 3 times great-granduncle, Joseph Cardinal, was an accomplished guide and interpreter. In 1787, he worked for Sir Alexander Mackenzie, at the time of the Northwest Company. In 1799, he was with David Thompson on the Beaver River. Records indicate that Joseph was married 3 times and worked for the Northwest Company as well as the Hudson's Bay Company as an interpreter in the Edmonton Peace River Rocky Mountain area. Joseph and Louise had a son named Jacques, who was born in 1798 near Fort Pitt. His first wife, who was born in 1805, was Josette Cris, the French way of saying Cree. Joseph's brother Jacques, Magliore's 3 times great-grandfather, married Josette Cris, also a Cree. One of Magliore's distant cousins, Joseph Narcisse Cardinal, was the first person charged and hanged for treason in the Lower Canada Rebellion of 1837, where French Canadians had taken up arms against the British Crown. The French and English often fought to seize control of Canada. Magloire's parents were Alexandre Cardinal, a store worker and interpreter, and Christine MacDonald, who was a second-generation Canadian whose family migrated from Scotland. The family spoke Cree at home. They could read and write English and likely spoke French as well. Magloire was the second-born of 9 children. On May 20th, 1918, Magloire was recruited in Edmonton to serve in the First World War. Magloire spoke fluent Cree, English, and French, and he's described as 5 foot 9 inches, with a swarthy complexion and black hair, weighing 150 pounds. Shortly after, he's admitted to the hospital with acute bronchitis and discharged a few days later. Magloire's initial training was at Camp Petawawa, where his health issues continued, contracting measles and spending almost a month in the hospital. On August 4th, 1918, Magloire embarked Halifax for the 11-day journey to Liverpool. He arrived in Bramshot, right in the middle of an influenza epidemic, which had already taken 348 servicemen. 2 months later, Magloire is admitted with the flu. He's described as a single farmer who's had a cough for years and a strong family history of tuberculosis. Magloire survives the influenza epidemic and is sent to France, eventually being deployed to the 21st Reserve Battalion, serving in the War Graves Detachment. The War Graves Detachment is a horrific job of finding dead soldiers and preparing them for burial. On July 25, 1919, Magloire boards the Saturnia in Glasgow, bound for Montreal, a trip taken 8 generations previously to the same destination by his ancestors. Finally, on August 10, 1919, he's discharged in Calgary. It is 5 years later, in 1924, Magloire marries Ellen Nellie Luty. In an audio recording, their son said his own marriage was arranged, so it is quite likely the same for Magloire and Nellie. By 1931, Magloire, his wife Ellen, 5 children, and his mother-in-law are living in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. The children's main language is English, while Magloire and Ellen speak Cree, and Ellen's mother speaks Slavey. Magloire is a fur trapper, reporting that he had made $700 the year before. Unfortunately, in July of 1935, Ellen dies at the age of 29. The children are sent to live with relatives. It is another 5 years later, in 1940, when Magloire Cardinal marries Delphine Bourillon. Magloire died in 1957 in Hay River in the Northwest Territories of Canada, and Delphine a decade later. It was a pleasure to meet you, Private Magloire Cardinal.